Whoa, look at how sharp the moon looks with this cheap achromat from Svbony. I thought that I might be testing a toy, but I was pleasantly surprised by most of it. This is the Svbony SV520 telescope kit, and it's meant to be a complete kit for beginners. When they initially asked me if I wanted to test this telescope, I said no because since I mostly focus on astrophotography, and I didn't really see this as an astrophotography telescope, and I still don't. But since I do quite a bit of visual astronomy through my outreach, I thought it would be a nice telescope to try out, especially since people ask me about what telescope they can get that comes with everything so that they don't have to keep buying accessories. And this does look like it's the complete telescope kit. Of course, I have the OTA here. It's really long, and you can see that I am, I can handle it with ease because this thing is super light. At the time of current upload, the price of the SV520 is $229 on Amazon due to the temporary decrease of tariffs, but the price has fluctuated all the way to $360 at one point. Anyways, thanks to Svbony for sending this to me. I believe that I'll have a really good use for this with my outreach. And I'll quickly go over the telescope, its features, and share my thoughts with you in this video. But first, let's see what comes in the box. So we have the OTA itself, which is a 90mm aperture, 800mm focal length refractor, making it an f8.9 telescope. It weighs just about 2 kilograms. And it also comes with a finder scope, which I really don't like. It also comes with a stainless steel tripod and an accessory tray. I have some thoughts on this really soon. It also comes with a mini small alt-az mount, along with the fine adjustment knobs and locking screws that go on that mount. We also have the 90-degree diagonal, a 2x Barlow, and a 25mm Kellner eyepiece. It also comes with the phone adapters for both the OTA and eyepiece adapter. It also comes with a wireless remote for your phone, a moon filter, and a manual. So this really does come with everything you need. Mine came with an extra 10mm Plössl eyepiece, and I found that this is just a variation of the product that costs an additional $5. And this kit really does have every accessory that you would need with a telescope kit, but are they any good? So let's set it up and take a look. So we have a light tripod. The stainless steel feels really good, but it's ultra light, and I think it works against it because when it comes to stability, you want something a little bit heavier. I think it's great for kids because you can handle it with one hand, but I suspect that I'll have issues with it in the field. I'll extend the legs all the way, and then I stick the center locking bar through the middle, which was actually a little bit of a pain to get through. I don't know if it's the machining or the threads, but it gave me a little bit of trouble. Then the mount goes right on top, and I tighten it. This part is pretty simple, and it feels actually pretty solid. The accessory tray goes next, so I use the locking mechanism with the hex screw to tighten it, and then there's an adjustment screw that tightens it even further. And then I noticed that the tray isn't actually flush against one of the legs. No matter what I do, it's loose. I even tightened the legs a little bit, and it's still loose. For visual, this will be okay, but since I'm already worried about stability, this adds to my concerns. Next, we add the adjustment knobs. They just pop on. They're solid plastic, nothing too special, and they attach just fine. I do wish they were kind of flexible like the SV225, and they were a little bit longer. Especially since the OTA itself is pretty long, I find myself having to reach around it, and I don't have the longest arms. Now I'll put the telescope up here and lock it into place. That's pretty easy to do. The dovetail has a little bump here for the phone holder, which also acts as a kind of lock to prevent the OTA from sliding out. That's pretty good thinking, Svbony. And it has a place for a cell phone, which is pretty neat. And looking at the focuser, it's a rack and pinion focuser. Not the smoothest, you can definitely feel it as you turn it. But for the price point, it's fine. And it's just a single speed focuser. Then the finder scope, which I really don't like. It's light and really hard to properly aim, especially with an f8.9 telescope where you're really zoomed in. So aligning this, I found, was a little bit of a pain, and I actually don't like this kind of finder anyway. So when I tested this for real outside, I ended up switching it out with one of my red dot finders. And then I installed a diagonal. The OTA comes with compression rings, which is actually pretty nice, so your diagonal or your eyepieces don't get damaged. And then I can use an eyepiece and the optional phone adapter. So I'm outside with the SV220. It's a clear night. I'm going to test it on the moon. We are at like 75% moon tonight, so it'll be a good bright moon, so we'll see if there are any chromatic aberrations. And this thing actually honestly looks really nice outside. Like somebody seeing a telescope for the first time, this is what they imagine, like a long refractor type telescope on a big tripod. I did extend it all the way so that I'm not breaking my back or my neck looking through the eyepiece at the moon. And as I mentioned earlier, this thing is really light. Like I can move this and like with ease manipulate it. And I know I'm really strong, but even if I wasn't this strong, it'd still be really easy to move. Being lightweight means that it's really portable, really easy for kids to use, but it could also mean that, you know, it can be pushed over pretty easily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to point this at the moon and then give you my thoughts. I have the 10mm Plössl eyepiece connected here. I do have the 25mm Kellner eyepiece somewhere. Don't need to use cell phone to find the thing, so I'm just going to unlock the clutches here so that I can freely point it to the moon. I'll use the finder. I really don't like this kind of finder. All right, found the moon. Even with the moon, this thing is so long. I wish I could make it go higher because it's hurting my back here. I found the moon with the 10mm eyepiece, and the moon is too big for it, so I'm gonna have to switch it out. But it fits the moon pretty nicely, and it looks kind of sharp. I can definitely see some chromatic aberrations, some purple haze around the moon, which is what I expected. I'm going to switch this out for the 25mm Kellner eyepiece and see what that looks like. I'm sure it's going to be much worse. Before I even put this in there, I just want to say that this feels really cheap. Like, it has like no weight to it. Here's the moon. Whoa, all right. Honestly, just live view looking at it, the moon looks actually much better than I thought it would. Moon looks pretty sharp. That's the f8.9. It is very bright. I can see, let me take my glasses off. I can see some chromatic aberrations on the edge, but it's far less than the 10mm Plössl. It's interesting that it stayed in focus. It looks like the 10mm Plössl and the 25mm Kellner are parfocal. I didn't have to readjust the focus at all. The moon looks actually pretty sharp. I am actually pretty impressed with this. And making slow motion control changes vibrates the whole thing, so the moon shakes quite a bit. And I expect that from such a cheap and lightweight tripod, as well as lightweight alt-az mount here. But all in all, it looks pretty good. Now let's upgrade the Kellner to a 7 to 21mm Svbony 135 zoom eyepiece. So I have the zoom eyepiece at about 17 or 18 millimeters. The moon looks really nice. Again, I'm seeing the same chromatic aberrations around the moon as I did with the 25mm and the 10mm eyepiece. A little bit of green, blue, and purple hazing around the bright moon. But the moon looks really sharp, as I would expect from almost an f9 system. It's a 90mm telescope. And the more I zoom in, the more vibrations I see when I make adjustments to the altitude or the azimuth knobs here. But I can actually clearly see a difference in quality between the eyepieces. So this eyepiece is much better, especially at the terminator. The shadows on the craters look incredibly sharp, much sharper than the 25mm Kellner eyepiece that I just used. And it was a little bit fuzzier on the 10mm Plössl, but that's probably because I was a little bit too zoomed in. All right, now I have my Teleview dielectric Eventbrite diagonal here, which is pretty heavy, and it works really well. It has like 99.9% light transmission, something like that. Oh boy. All right, so I have this down to 7mm, and I was able to focus it, and it looks a lot sharper than the base 25mm, 10mm, and the diagonal that was provided with this telescope. So getting a diagonal upgrade seems to make this telescope perform a lot better than it normally would with the accessories that come with it. And I'm honestly pretty impressed. But again, chromatic aberrations are there, but since this is such a slow telescope, I don't really see it unless I am moving around. And then the chromatic aberrations also move around and come and go. So I'm going to use the attached, the eyepiece phone adapter that came with this. I'll take a couple of pictures with my phone as well as a DSLR, and we'll do a true test. All right, so I have my DSLR connected using a T-ring and T adapter, and actually the moon looks pretty good, so come closer and take a look. All right, looking at my LCD screen directly, you can kind of see just how sharp the moon looks, and I'm just going to take a quick snap. The moon actually looks pretty nice and sharp. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to bring the exposure up, go down here, let it stabilize, and you can see the moon. I'm going to try and focus it a little bit better, but you can see that it's really annoying just how much it moves. But look at this. That looks really cool, right? And the phone screen doesn't do it justice, but it looks much better. We can see just how fragile it is. And look at the, let it stabilize. I'll take a picture. That's gonna be too bright. Let it stabilize. Takes a little while. But look at those craters. They look really cool. So this is what the video looks like out of the DSLR, and you can see just how shaky it is. And it's just any kind of adjustments I make, the tripod just vibrates like crazy. But you can see the moon looks actually really nice. Like, just looking at it like this with some minor adjustments to the exposure, it looks really nice. Just looking at this video, we can't really see any kind of chromatic aberrations, which is kind of nice. But if I were to open up one of the images that I've taken, a single shot exposure, if we zoom in, this is straight out of the camera. I did minor edits. I actually turned down the exposure here. This is 1/500 or 1/250th of a second at ISO 800. It was a little bit too bright, so I turned the exposure down one stop. And you can see that you can actually see chromatic aberrations around this this flying fish that I caught. It's probably a bird or a leaf somewhere. But if you look at the edges, we can see some chromatic aberrations. I don't know if it translates well into the YouTube video, but I can see a blue glow here, and the lunar surface is a little bit green, yellow, and it exists all around, but it's really not noticeable since it's such a high focal length telescope. Here is a video I took with my cell phone. It's an eyepiece projection. You can see the moonlight looks pretty nice, and if you look here, you can see a little bit of blurriness. That's actually the eyepiece, not the telescope itself. It's eyepiece projection is always pretty difficult, but the moon looks really sharp. You can see like all these bright white spots here, and this is like all auto exposure from the phone. And here's focusing, autofocusing, and look at what the moon looks like. That is incredible. Here is an image. This was taken with the cell phone. You can see chromatic aberrations. There's a little bit more noticeable. Some more noticeable here. And you can see that the phone did something. And here's another shot. You can see the moon looks pretty nice here. And this is just with the cell phone. So here's actually what a bright star looks like. This is actually Arcturus in the east. And you can see chromatic aberrations on a smaller target is much more noticeable. But on like the less dim stars, again, I wasn't tracking, and the thing just would not stop vibrating. So shots were pretty difficult, but we can see chromatic aberrations, but the stars look nice. And as I said, this isn't really meant for astrophotography anyway, so not bad. I do want to test this out on some double stars and maybe a globular cluster at some point. So now my final thoughts on this refractor. I really like the OTA. It was quite surprising, the quality that I was able to see with the moon, and I think that this would come in really handy with my upcoming star parties. We were trying to grow a group of volunteers, and many of them don't have telescopes, so I think setting this up either on the mount that it came with, but probably not, or maybe on the SV520 mount that I reviewed a few months ago, or my AZ GTI mount, my Skywatcher AZ GTI mount that tracks, it would make it super easy for any volunteer to just start using this. You know, if I set them up, if I focus this and I show them how to use it. So I think this would be a really great learning tool and a really great way to talk to other people who are trying to get into astronomy. In fact, here is a blurry picture of a recent outreach event with this telescope. About 200 people saw the moon through at least one of the 3 telescopes on the field, and the SV520 was right in front of them. And as you can see, I actually used my Skywatcher tripod and the SV225 mount, which was a lot more stable than the one that came with the SV520. I really do like the OTA. The focuser here is a little bit rough, but for this price range and for the quality of this telescope, it's totally fine. It is a single speed focuser. And honestly, this OTA here is what keeps this whole thing from feeling like a toy. Because some of the parts, some of the accessories they could be improved quite a bit. For example, you've already seen my disdain for this type of finder scope because they're just so hard to align. They're not beginner friendly at all. So I did test this out, but I ended up switching to a red dot finder, which was a lot better. Even though that wasn't fully aligned, it was a lot better than this. And you've seen my complaints about the tripod and the mount. It's just so lightweight, and there's just a few things that are wrong with it that could be improved. The vibrations were really killing me because at times it felt like it just never stopped vibrating. But again, I think both of those are okay for anyone trying to get into the hobby, because this whole kit gives you everything you need in order to start observing. But you may find yourself wanting more or wanting better pretty soon after you get it. The eyepieces and diagonal that came with the telescope was adequate, I believe. They feel really light, they feel really cheap, and that's because they are. That's why this whole kit, there's so many things included with this for just a few $100s. But I found that pairing it with a better eyepiece and diagonal went quite a long way because the light transmission was a lot better. I paired it with this Svbony SV135 zoom eyepiece that I'm also testing, and it actually worked really well. These type of telescopes, the zoom eyepiece is actually great for outreach, and I have a couple of these. A better diagonal and eyepieces are not necessary upgrades, but it's something that you may consider soon after you get into the hobby. The dovetail phone adapter that it comes with is pretty interesting. You put your phone here, and as you're looking at stuff in space, you can see what's on the phone. It's interesting, but it's really hard to align. There's only a single point of contact here, so getting it parallel to your telescope is a little bit difficult, I found. And apps like Astrohopper, which I really recommend. It doesn't actually work with this because Astrohopper expects you to put your phone like flat against the OTA, parallel this way, instead of parallel this way. So that doesn't work, but it was still interesting to use like Sky Safari Stellarium with this and see where it goes. But it's still interesting to be able to use a phone app like Sky Safari and Stellarium and just browse the sky and see just what's there. And is this all worth it? Especially since the OTA itself is actually surprisingly well built. It does well. It is an achromat. We do have chromatic aberrations, but when you're doing visual, you don't really see it, especially on bright objects like the moon. I'll test it out on planets when I get the chance in the future. And at the current price of $229, I think it's worth it just for the OTA alone and some of the accessories. The tripod and mount could use upgrades, but the diagonal eyepieces are perfectly fine for beginners. And I don't currently have any kind of coupon for you that Svbony sent me, but if I get one, it will be in the description below, so check there before ordering. See if you can save yourself some money if you're planning on getting this kit. This was a really fun telescope to test. Thanks to Svbony for sending this to me. It will get a lot of use in my star parties, and I'm planning to use this, test it a little bit more, probably on the sun. I need to make a filter for it, and when the planets come back around in the fall. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, clear skies, and remember to vote out the party that's responsible for all of these price increases.